Terry, firstly, welcome to the show. Look, we've shown the clip from former New South Wales Premier Dominic Perrottet's valedictory speech in the opening. You wanted to come on and have a few comments about it. What are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are not your thoughts, actually. And I did read your piece for Flat White, basically really lashing into Dominic Perrottet. I mean, I think it was almost as if you were a sort of a disciplined mistress. You were whipping him so hard because compared to what we experienced down here in Victoria with Daniel Andrews and his North Face jacket, I think Dominic Perrottet and Gladys Berejiklian were pussycats by comparison. They actually did their best to keep the state of New South Wales open, to keep it going, to resist the worst of the public health lobby in terms of pressure, the worst of the media panic. I think actually they kept their nerve far better than anybody down here where I am, and certainly many other places around Australia and around the world. So I think you actually gave Dominic Perrottet a bit of a bad press. I don't think he quite deserved it.
I would definitely disagree, because I didn't go after Perrottet until he went looking for praise. So my point in the article was, just because you're the highest of all the low bars doesn't mean you deserve to be rewarded or thought well of during that campaign. And don't forget, I mean, to be fair, you were in Victoria, Terry, which was viral around the world as being easily one of the worst places to live during the pandemic. But Perrottet admitted in a speech that rat testing and QR tracing, which he re-implemented, had no public health value whatsoever, but was done to build public confidence. Have a quick look at this clip.
The most ironic one I thought was, we ended up bringing QR codes back when we weren't even tracking and tracing. There was no science behind it at all. It had zero utility, but there was a massive campaign, and when those massive campaigns get run, what it does, it depletes confidence. And that kind of reporting, as we've seen over this period of time, has depleted confidence in our people. So we actually brought it back for one reason only, to instill confidence so that people would go out with using QR codes.
Surely stuff like that, Terry, is warranted for criticism.
Look, I almost would agree with you on that, to be honest with you, Alexandra. I think, but then again, placebos have been used for time immemorial, and clearly this was a bit of a placebo for the public health authorities and for politicians who are, subservient to them. And I think Mr. Perrottet made that point. And certainly in Victoria, my state, I think even at the height of it, the Andrews government effectively admitted the same thing, that, it might work, but at least it gives us an idea. We could do a bit of contact tracing, maybe, and anything helps. But as far as it goes, I think it was more as Mr. Perrottet, I think, was admitting, it was a way of getting us to, toe the line, behave ourselves, keep tabs on our own behaviour. And in that sense, I think there are lessons we have to learn from what happened in the COVID years, no question. And I think New South Wales got it better than other jurisdictions in Australia, and certainly much better, far, far better than Victoria, which I think was affected by our then Premier's desire, I think, to unleash his inner authoritarian. And that's something I think that was a real object lesson from all of this, that politicians and people in positions of authority, of power, can let themselves go and let that power and authority go to their head.
I'm not going to rehash my criticisms because I laid them out in the editorial, but one thing I do find troubling is that you're quite right about Victoria, about how they haven't really learned lessons, because there was an overreach of power, particularly from the Victorian Premier, but also from the New South Wales Premiers, because we had more than one during the pandemic, and none of that has been reversed. So my issue, and a lot of issues that people have with Perrottet's washing of his hands, shall we say, is that he knew what happened was wrong and he had the power to stop it, but he didn't. And because people like him walk away from it, there is no change to process. They didn't use their time to make sure that these laws were rolled back. So, Terry, if premiers are allowed to walk away like this, how is anything ever going to change for the next pandemic?
Did I say he was allowed to walk away? No, I didn't say that, Alexandra. What I think I said to you in responding to you in the morning double shot was that I think it's actually a good thing when politicians do acquire the wisdom of hindsight. And I thought Dominic Perrottet had acquired the wisdom of hindsight in his valedictory speech and the comments he made in media around it, in the sense that I think he learned lessons as a policymaker and a politician that he didn't actually appreciate or understand before. And when it comes to public life and public policy, I think if our politicians, our decision makers, and that includes unelected officials as well as elected ones, actually are prepared to learn by what went wrong as well as what went right, they make the world a better place. I mean, one of the reasons I think we need a National Royal Commission into COVID is actually learning those lessons, finding out why things went the way they did and why they should never go in particular ways ever again. And I think it's very important that we have that, but neither federal or state governments want to go there, do they?
Well, you're quite correct. None of them are prepared to open a Royal Commission into themselves, and that's probably part of the problem. But I'd rather politicians didn't learn lessons with our lives when publications like this one were quite clear about what was going on at the time and the criticisms for their behaviour. But look, Terry, Perrottet isn't only going to be judged for his record regarding COVID. He's also the Premier that signed off on the Mount warning being handed over to an Aboriginal group who promptly banned women and non-tribal members from accessing one of the most loved tourist climbs in the state, and that's currently under dispute right now. But Victoria's got a similar problem where politicians are pushing ahead with these treaties and these lockout laws and new rules based upon your ethnicity. Do you think that politicians have forgotten how to listen to people when it comes to this sort of thing?
Well, politicians who have been in office for a long time, as they certainly have in Victoria over a decade now, they tend to forget, particularly if they've got oppositions that are so, well, weak as water. I was going to use another expression that's probably not the family publication, but that are so weak as water that they provide no real opposition at all. That effectively they can govern and say what they like with impunity and listen to the interest groups and the rent seekers and the activists they prefer with impunity, which is what is happening in Victoria with the Aboriginal lobby. I just think that is not good government and it is not good governance. And I think if Mr Perrottet again maybe reflects on his time in office as Premier and realises that that was an error of judgment, and particularly if it's being applied in a way that is, if it was anybody but an Aboriginal organisation or an Aboriginal tribe or family or nation or whatever you want to call them, would be considered misogynist and sexist and even racist. I just think there is a real problem there. And that's one of the problems I think we have in our society at the moment, that we're prepared to play these identity politics games American style in such a way that we're giving these small minorities power and status and authority and control over public money that they simply don't deserve.
Well, your comments on that issue have been particularly good, Terry, for a long time. And I know it's a problem that's facing Victoria more so than anybody else, except perhaps Queensland, who's also got a serious issue when it comes to land rights and these new bodies that are acquiring public property against the wishes of the communities who live there. But look, we've just seen New South Wales announce that the Liberal Party's basically missed the deadline for an awful lot of councillors that were meant to be endorsed for the party. So too bad, so sad, apparently. And it gives me the impression that in a lot of ways the Liberals are dropping the game here when it comes to getting themselves back in power and getting re-elected. I wrote a bit of a tongue-in-cheek article about, did the Conservatives lose on purpose? And look at Victoria. What do you think, Terry? Do you think that the Conservatives need to pick up their game if they're ever going to get back in power in this country, particularly your state?
Well, certainly in terms of your article, I don't think the British Conservatives lost on purpose, but certainly I don't think their hearts were in trying.
It was kind of a joke. Let's put it that way.
But no, I accept it was tongue in cheek. But certainly, I think politicians go into elections to win them, or at least to minimise their losses. And I think the Tories can at least say they did some of that. But when it comes to Australian politics, I really do think that. Particularly the Liberal Party, and you talk about your state of New South Wales and local government elections. I actually think that local government's very important because it's the wokest level of government. It's where all the Fruit Loops and lunatics can actually get power and influence, as we can seen with local councils having positions on Gaza, for instance, and flying a Palestinian flag. I think Conservatives, doesn't matter if they're formally aligned with the Liberal Party or any other political party on the right of politics, need to actually get in there, put their hands up, to actually stand up for traditional mainstream community values and really try and push out the Fruit Loops and the nutcases and get some sensible decisions on things like roads, rates and rubbish.
I think that's some very good advice, Terry. Some advice that certainly Victoria could use, because right now you wouldn't even know you've got an opposition down there unless you were on the ground. From our view in New South Wales, we're like, there are Victorian Conservatives. I haven't heard of those. Like Western Australia, where are the Conservatives? They've completely fallen off the map.
They're there, but I think the Victorian State Liberal Party has lost the will to live, let alone to win elections, and that's a real problem. And I know that you particularly in what you write to blame the opposition leader John Pizzuto, and yes, I think he has made some fundamental errors of judgment that he's paying for, and I think the Liberals are paying for. But as the Liberal Party as a whole, it's just a dog's breakfast of factionalised egos and power-hungry factional warlords. It's just not it's a snake pit, it's a cesspit, and it just doesn't deserve to even be within a bull's roar of government. The problem is that Victorians are suffering as a result of having absolutely abysmal quality government not held to account by even more abysmal quality opposition.
Well, you're so right, Terry. And look, let's hope that all of our elected officials can get their act together and actually help us to look forward, because I think everybody, no matter what their beef is, whether they're tired from COVID or tired from all this activism, they want to have another era of prosperity and peace. They can get back to the business of raising their families. So look, Terry, thank you so much for joining us here on Spectator TV.
Thanks, Alexandra.
After the break, Sophie Corcoran joins us from the UK, the front line in the war against free speech. Don't go away.